task that was to start the Inspector General's office in Palm Beach County. And I would like for everyone to welcome Inspector General Sheryl Steckler.
Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Office of Inspector General for at least the next 20 minutes. Hopefully, by the time you're done, I will answer most of your questions. And my presentation is more of kind of what we do, but it's also what we've done so far to kind of give you a little flavor of the difference of the offices and also kind of what we do. We are also in the county charter as well. We have the same jurisdiction and then some. We have both the county, the 38 municipalities. We also have Solid Waste Authority, Children's Service Council, and the Healthcare District. The Healthcare District and Children's Service Council joined us in January of this year. And so we have a lot of jurisdiction, but more importantly, not only do we go at the county and the municipality level, but what's very important is that we go at the contractor level. And not only the contractor level, but we go at the lower tier. We call them sub-subs. And lots of times what you see is a government entity will contract with someone, but they'll sub the work out. And what we wanted to make sure is we have jurisdiction so that if the municipality or the county is got issues, we can get in there for them and look at those subcontractors. So it's very, very important that that's in this ordinance. In a nutshell, the key to our office is really independence. And what that means is it doesn't mean that we don't partner with the government. It just means the government can't alter our findings. It's very important that we work together because we want a successful resolution. We want them to implement recommendations. We don't want to, really put out recommendations that they can't possibly make. Sometimes it's a fiscal issue. We understand that. But we're really about working together. But again, the independence comes from the fact that they can't alter what we find. And so as such, we have direct access into all records, unrestricted access, and the goal is to prevent and detect fraud, waste, abuse in government. And the key term is prevent. We have spent a lot of time on the front end, and I'm going to talk about our contract division a little bit. But the goal is to put controls in place so that people don't do wrong things. So that is the whole purpose of what we're trying to spend a lot of time in, is to prevent things from going bad. And it's kind of interesting because we were set up because of all the bad that happened here, but we don't really go after corruption, quote unquote. That is for the state attorney's office, that is for the U.S. attorney's office, that's the FBI. We are really about making government more efficient, more accountable, and more effective. So a lot of times, I always say I can't please everyone, because there's people that say, why aren't you putting people in jail? Well, we don't put people in jail. That's not our role. Our role is to make government better. Our responsibilities are threefold. For the most part, we publish reports, and all of our reports are on the website, and I'm going to take you to that in a little bit so you can find them. Every 6 months, I meet with what's called the Inspector General Committee. That is the committee that is made up of the 5 members of the Commission of Ethics, the state attorney, and the public defender. They're the ones that hire the Inspector General, and at the end of the day, they'll be the ones to remove an Inspector General if there's abuse of power. So that is the IG committee. And then at the end of the year, each year, I issue what's called an annual report. That's a very important report because it tells you all the activities that the office does. So every 6 months, we do a PowerPoint. It's on our website. And every year, we do an annual report. So if you're really bored, come pay attention to those reports. But you should, because you can see, as a taxpayer, what we're doing. It's very, very important that you see the improvements that we're making in government and what our functions are. We mainly have 3 divisions in a typical Inspector General's role. And I actually was the Inspector General for the Department of Children and Families for 8 years. Typically, you see audit and you see investigations. But what was important in this ordinance was that they put in the ordinance contracts that we would be notified in advance of any procurement, any bid process. Because that's where they were having a lot of hiccups. The beauty of that is that's where we get in the prevention mode. We hope to stop things from going down the track before we wind up with bid protests. Why? Because bid protests are expensive, both to the government and to the business. So it's kind of a twofold. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about contract oversight first. And what we do here, we sort of have a couple hats here. In the beginning, we spent a lot of time in the front end. We would go sit in at the selection committees and figure out how they're doing it. And we started to see kind of different patterns going on, especially in the county initially, where you have 5, 7 people on a selection committee, and they really weren't all of them knowledgeable of what they were doing. Well, why is that important that they're knowledgeable? Because sometimes what we saw is these contracts were won by 1 or 2 points, or a small business. shifted the power to the person that has small business. And so when we started looking at this, we go, you know, they're not winning by much, and they're million-dollar contracts. So we started to write about the fact that you need to be well-informed as a person sitting on that selection committee to know what are you evaluating, because businesses spend a lot of money bidding, a lot of money. And what I heard from the business community is, you know what, Sheryl, it's not, we just don't do it anymore. It's not worth it because we know we're not going to get the job. That's a problem. We got to change that behavior. And I know the Board of County Commission and others have asked, why are our local businesses not bidding here? And we're kind of learning why. And one of them is because there's some unpreparedness, unintentional, but unpreparedness during this process. So we started writing about it, and we call them either contract observations or contract notifications. And I'll take you through a few of those examples in a minute. The other thing we started to do is when I got here, I kept hearing, Sheryl, look at change orders. Change orders, change orders, change orders, especially in the county at the time. You know, there's something wrong with that. Well, maybe there is, maybe there's not. But we started to we're looking at the jail right now because it is a huge, huge project. But, you know, again, not necessarily that there's intentional wrongdoing. What I'm finding in this county is really either there's so much work to oversee that you can't catch everything, and there's not enough staff, or there's not good process in place. There wasn't a good contract in place with legal language to protect the government. And so those are the things that we're starting to peel away the onion to make government raise their bar a little bit so they don't get taken advantage of. So what we started doing about a year ago is we started issuing observations and notifications. Every once in a while we're going to do a review, but for the most part, observations is where we kind of see something that's not a material weakness in the contract process. It's not going to change the outcome, but we saw some things. And I always use Mr. Weissman's example. He's got a very large organization, and he can't possibly know everything that's going on during these processes. So we write to let them know, hey, look, nope, it's not going to change it, it's not going to taint it, but these are the things we observed. There's no response needed by the government, and we just let them know. On a notification, those are the majority of what we're starting to issue. And those are really where we see a material weakness in the process that we want to help before it goes too far down the pipe and they're running into problems. So we will issue notifications. Yes, sir?
Can I just have a quick question?
Sure.
Could any of these situations be part of possible set-aside for awards, things like that, special groups and things? Is that got anything to do with it, or is that just...
What do you mean set aside?
In other words, I do contracting in the federal arena, and there's set-asides for all sorts of things. Services able veteran-owned, small business, women-owned business, all sorts of things like that.
The county only has, a lot of people think there's still a minority. There's not. It's just the SBE program, small business, and it's not based on minority anymore, whether you're African-American or white. That went away years ago. In fact, we have a report out there on the SBA program as a management review that outlines that whole thing, because there was massive confusion where people thought that was still the case, and it's not. But there are certain awards you get for having a small business. Absolutely. And they range from 5 to 10 points. And again, if you're winning by 1 point, that's significant. And I'm going to take you through, actually I took it off the slide, we actually had a very large company that was utilizing a small business as a distributor. Well, what we learned, this was 7 years in the making, we had another small business that said, they ain't a small business, they're not a distributor. I've been fighting this with the county for years, we've been in the courts for years, and they kept losing. Well, sure enough, we looked at the 7 documents, we called the 7 companies, and everyone said, never heard of the company at all. Completely false. And as a result, the problem was when we took it to the state attorney's office for fraud, what happened was because the county had been fighting this in court, not knowing, but it wasn't intentional, they just didn't do their homework real well for 7 years. The state attorney couldn't file charges because witness versus witness, it wouldn't look good. But the good news is they completely gutted that program. They're redoing all their reforms, and they're holding contractors more accountable for using small businesses. But it was a very free-floating program that was really weak. So putting those controls in place, because small businesses make a big difference in this environment. And I'm going to talk about one case in particular on how they make more money if you use a small business. Staying with the contracts real quick. This was one you may have heard about in the town of Lake Park. This was one of these where you kind of go, the county went this way and Lake Park went that way. And what happened here is, this actually was very similar to what happened in the grand jury report, which is why we're here, is because there were land deals that looked suspicious. But those are for county land deals. In this situation, there was a grant, and part of the grant was for the county to help cities on projects. So Lake Park wanted this marina project, and so the county said, okay, we'll negotiate it, we'll go forward with it. Well, what happened is, in a nutshell with this one, is, you know, back when this was purchased at $2.4 million back in like 2005, you know, the market was where it was and everything was grand and people were, you know, things were looking pretty good. But what happened in 2010? The market went tanked, right? So the question becomes, why would the county pay 283% above the market value for this land? Looks suspicious. So we went, okay, we'll look, and we did, and the file was empty. There was no appraisals, there was no documentation, there was nothing to determine whether this was a good deal, bad deal, why did they do it. So again, this was the transparency piece of it, is that we didn't put it for fraud, we just said, all right, something doesn't make sense, and what we found was the requirements didn't require for county to municipal purchases an appraisal. So now, I think actually we told them to put it in the policy, but they're actually putting in the ordinance. They're going to require, based on the amount, to have at least 1, 2, 3 appraisals so that we can stop this. And again, the prevention side of the house is once those controls are in place, that stops this type of purchasing. Because to the public eye, you and I go, what? How did they justify this? It doesn't make sense. So that was key, but it's interesting, the city actually said, well, this is the county's fault because the county bought it for us. Well, no, not really, because what the city did is they put an interlocal agreement, and in the agreement it says if you don't build it, you own it. So if they don't build that project, the city's out that $2.4 million. That's not good. So this didn't work. They both are responsible, and they have to work better together to make sure that these kind of things don't happen. The jail expansion, this is just one of several reports that we're going to be doing. This is another situation where the contract wasn't written well, and the procedures in the county, they do things a little bit differently, where you have one group that's in contracts, and then you have what they call the FDO, which is just facilities, which is overseeing this project. And when you talk to the contract people under the Board of County Commission, they're very, very strict, and they have lots of strong rules. But when you talk to the FDO side of the house, theirs is a little bit looser. And as a result of the looseness of this contract, this contractor actually brought in people, and they call it a contract manager. He's responsible for this project, and we pay him very, very heavily to oversee this project. Well, he allowed $370,000 in a lump sum payment to go for travel and per diem on some of their contractors. Well, in the real world, travel and per diem is, you have to have receipts, and there's per diem is like, $40, $50, $60 a day, depending on which per diem it is. And there was completely no documentation at all. Because it was a lump sum, the contract allowed it, they didn't have to have it, yet it required an audit. So how do you audit when you don't have the documentation? So that became a little bit of a mess. And then we looked further and we said, okay, what else is going on? Well, they paid some guy from like California to come over here for $500,000 moving expenses, to relocate. Well, where did he relocate? Was he staying at the Ritz or was he staying at the Hilton? We don't know, because there's no documentation. So there went almost $900,000 out the door that we don't really have any documentation for to know whether that was a good number or a bad number. Yes?
Real quick, because you're saying it's a contracting issue, so who's writing these contracts?
Well, most of the time you're lawyers.
Lawyers. County lawyers?
In this situation, this is the county.
And what are the requirements? Is there anything in our county law that says what they're supposed to do, how they're supposed to be setting those contracts up?
There's best practices out there, and obviously your attorneys want to write what's best for the government. But again, are they skilled enough to be looking at it from that perspective? I would say the state's the same way. The outside world hires these high-priced contract attorneys, and the government gets messed over every time unless you have really good contract-specific lawyers. So your lawyers, if they're not, or your contract folks are not strong enough, you're going to miss something. And really, if you want to put your money where it goes, it's in the lawyer world of contracting, or a very strong contract manager who knows how to write a contract. And that's what we're seeing time and time again, is there's loopholes, not only in the contract, but there's also loopholes in the policy. We're seeing, especially in some of the cities, where at the end of the day it says the city manager can do whatever he wants. Well, that opens up a whole other can of worms. Just because you can doesn't mean you shouldn't. It isn't the best deal for your government. So in this situation, the good news is the contract side that's under the board actually put in policy after this was done. We engaged him in this, and he said, oh, this is a problem, we're going to fix it. And they immediately put policy, so this won't happen again, at least not without actual documents. Just
The contract lawyers write it up, but aren't they directed or by directors or managers who say how to what
yeah,
put in?
It's a relationship between the director and the attorney. It's not always the attorney. Sometimes it's the manager saying, I want it this way. So but your lawyer's got to be strong enough to say, you're going to have a weakness here if you're not careful. So, I mean, you rely on your lawyers. You want them to make sure that they're protecting you and protecting your assets. So it depends. But truly, attorneys are at the end of the day the ones that write most of the contracts that I've seen. It may not happen everywhere, but you really want to make sure you've got your ducks in a row and you've got your I's dotted, your T's crossed.
Quick follow-up on that. It's only $1 million, I know, but is that just going to drop now, or is something going to be done
it's
about it?
It's gone because we cannot, because they didn't require it. Gone.
How is
The
that?
only thing that now what we have done is we have still asked for them to get the receipts from the company, and because there's actually one part of that they might be able to recover. I think it's the 512. They might be able to recover that because we might have found something in the contract.
So that construction manager, he escaped without any
Well,
malfeasance, nothing like that?
We're still looking at the project. We're peeling away the onion bit by bit because at the end of the day, you're correct. You have to hold that CMAR responsible, and technically that piece of it should have been his. So yes, we have asked for them to recoup the money, and we'll see what happens on that second piece of that. So yes, the CMAR definitely is responsible for a big piece of this. But then you've got to work with the county. There might be one in the county that agrees and one that kind of doesn't agree, and you got to balance that. But we're not done with the jail project. We're still going, and we're going to be requesting as much money back as possible. But the legal part of this is, if they weren't required to do it by contract, it's really hard to get your money back. But we may be able to get half of it back. They're still looking at their legal ability to do that. I mean, obviously the county wants their money back if they can get it.
So those the two offices are separate.
Yes.
In this kind of case, does the ethics commission then come in and look into like gross negligence on behalf of the contract?
No, because we wouldn't have jurisdiction over the contract manager of the CMAR. He's not an employee. So, again, it's one of those that it's not gross negligence because the contract allowed it. And that's why the contracts are so important to be written well. If your contract allows it, and then you'd have to prove intent that it was intentionally written that way. And what I'm really seeing in this
Who
county,
investigates that? Is my
well, we would have done that. We would have done that if we had felt it was intentional. We would investigate it.
I just have to say, according to limited government, fiscal responsibility, I'm sorry guys, I'm laughing. This is a debacle of government. This is just a huge, more red tape, more government, and just who over here, over there. Excuse me.
The idea is to shine the light and hold them accountable, ask for the recovery. That begins and tighten the process. The problem in this county that I'm seeing overarching is that the rules are very weak. The rules are very open, and as a result, the governments are getting taken advantage of. Now, whether they wrote them intentionally like that or not, they are not that strong. And the first thing you have to do is tighten the belt, tighten the rules, so that this kind of activity, this won't happen again now, because they put policy in place. That will prevent that from ever happening again. And we're still hopeful. I mean, I'm hoping the government can get half of it back, but it will be a legal battle. And yes, it is disgusting. There's no doubt about it. That's just one piece of one project of millions of dollars that we found on one report. But you got to start somewhere, and unfortunately, not everything is intentionally done for fraud. It is just bad policies, bad contracts, and you got to get them better.
Who ran this project for the county?
The facility management under Audrey Wolf, that's where that project is. It's under there.
And so why wouldn't the project manager of the county be held responsible for gross negligence in defining the contract and negotiating the contract? I mean, in my business, in the corporate world, if I negotiated an agreement where we ended up losing this money and we had no way to go back and I would be fired.
Well, I hear you, and I would tell you the response, and no disrespect to Audrey, but I'll tell you the response back from her was, well, we'll just take the auditing requirement out. And And I went, oh.
Yeah.
Well, we stopped it. But, I mean, and that's what we're dealing with, guys, okay? So what we did is we went to the contract side of the Board County Commission, to Irwin, and said, Irwin, we have a problem. Houston, radar, problem. And through that to Bob Weissman, the county has fixed.
But see, from her standpoint, she should want the audit, she should
One
want
would
a good
think.
contract, because who knows if some of that money didn't feed back to her.
Well,
Because, I
there was
mean,
no allegation to that at all.
But that,
We
that
didn't
would
see
be
that.
the obvious thing.
I don't think
If
that's,
there's no, if there's
I
no.
know, this is such a large project, I think it's clearly you're not holding that CMAR responsible. That's
No,
clear.
not him responsible, but her responsible.
Well, that's Mr. Weissman's job to hold her accountable for the oversight.
Mr. License.
Mr. Weissman's accountable. Yeah. So again, we shine the light. That's the first one of several we're going to be issuing, with the hopes that they will get better at overseeing it. But again, that contract left years ago down the pipe before we even existed. So we couldn't get in there early enough to help with that contract side of the house. It was long gone. These are now just the ends of these projects, and we're just now getting into it years later because we're here. So again,
Do you think they wrote these contracts specifically to do this? Sure.
well, again, it was written years ago. You know, I can't tell you. You know, right now we're not seeing any fraudulent activity, not yet. A lot of this again is just loopholes, and again, you know, some of these contracts are this big. Corporate companies know how to outwit government. They hire high-priced attorneys. Why? Because they know how to write those little words in there that literally leave the government vulnerable. And that's why we really got to get a little bit better in that world to make sure that we're not taking advantage of it. And the state's the same way. They're a victim of it too, but they got to learn what their priorities are. This one we just released a little bit ago. This one is really almost a sunshine violation. It was really quite disturbing to many residents in Palm Beach Gardens. You know, it's funny, when I got here, most of my world is usually employees reporting to me, but since I've been here, it's contractors and it's outside public people that report to my office, and you know, a lot of contractors and elected officials have been coming forward lately, which is interesting because usually it's the employee. In this situation, we were told about this where in a meeting, at a board meeting in March, they were bringing up the waste management. If you haven't read lately, I'm all over waste management, Republic, everybody. I'm everywhere solid waste. In this situation, Waste Management had an extension on their contract up for renewal. And what we're seeing in several of the cities is they just keep renewing without competitive bid. And anyone will tell you why. Why are you not competing these? There are at least 5 companies that we know of in this town. And everyone that's bidded, especially in Broward County, has gone to major reduced rate. And it's kind of funny because now what we're seeing is each of the cities are getting major reduced rates. So there's like a little theme going on here. So the question is, and Delray did the same thing, why are you not, you know, putting this stuff out for bid? And Juneau, we just sat in that one, and it was just pure lazy. They just didn't want to have to do with it. They like the service. Well, you write the requirements so that you put service as a high priority. But again, this situation, what was really disturbing about this is that they told the public at the March meeting, we are going to bring this up in May. Our May meeting is when we're going to decide. In their April meeting, we find out, because the public called and said, this just happened. It was not on the agenda. It was added on in the beginning of the meeting, and it was taken up as a last agenda item at the night, which is usually late in Palm Beach Gardens, and they voted on it. And
They have to advertise it?
they advertised it the first time. No, because it's just an extension. So they didn't have to advertise it, but they were supposed to put it on they put it on their first agenda, but they moved it. They put it on the agenda that night.
For May.
In April, they put it on the agenda as an add-on. They did an add-on. Now, what the law says is that you are supposed to advertise if there's an interested party. So this is a slippery slope that they didn't technically they didn't violate the law, but there is case law out there that says if there's a public interest and there's interested parties, you ought to let them be heard. Well, they didn't. They didn't. So they didn't break the law, but they certainly violated the public's trust. And so we wrote about that because actually the next day in April, that city manager signed that contract. Next day, it was signed. You know, that's just not right. In fact, there was a company in the audience that day that was going to bid. So again, the law's not on the side on the sunshine. The sunshine law is pretty weak, believe it or not.
How is that not breaking the law?
Sunshine law is very weak. It's very weak, but it didn't break the law. Is it right? Absolutely not. To the public interest, it's not right at all. But here's the issue. Where are all the residents of Palm Beach Gardens? You know, other than the same people that show up every day, and you see them, same people show up at each of these meetings, there wasn't an outcry of what happened. And then it was too late. Nobody even knew it happened until it was too late. But if the citizens, if you don't hold it, like you guys would hear, you know, if you're, I have to say Wellington's very engaged. But if you don't, as a citizen, hold your elected officials and your city manager accountable, then this is what you're going to get. And that's just not right. They should have never done that. For the good of the people of their city, they should not have done that. And they got away with it. And there's been no public outcry.
But it seems like once they announced they were going to hear it in May, they would have had to hear it in May. No?
No, because they did an add-on in April, which was totally legal.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, believe it or not. Because the law is very weak in this. It was amazing. It was, I mean, we tried. We tried everything we could. Called the state attorney's office, we tried. But because they did an add-on, then the way the law is written, because it was a renewal, it wasn't a new bid, it wasn't an experiment, it was just a renewal. And that's why you're seeing some of these cities do these renewals. Those are red flags. Those are red flags. So again, what we do is we shine the light, and then it's up to the citizens to get vocal in their council meetings. Yes.
So your objection is the fact they used renewal method, or your objection is they shouldn't bid it to maybe get a better price?
Well, I think the public would say, why wouldn't you bid it to potentially get a better price? And two, what this situation was is they weren't transparent. They should have heard it in May, so people could have stood up and said something that would have come to the meetings, and people that wanted to be interested in bidding would have showed up possibly. I mean, we'll never know because they didn't do it. They went a month early.
So is there ever an opportunity for renewals to be properly used?
Well, in 5 years, this will come up again. Now, there's a law, there's a 5-year renewal. Now, and actually, the law says a maximum of 30 years, and we actually caught Juneau with one that was at 30, it was at 28 years, and the renewal would have put them over 30. So they called it a new contract without bid. Why? Because the policy in the city says the city manager can do what he wants. And that's what we're finding, guys. I mean, that's what's happening, is if you don't have good rules, then your government gets to do, these city managers get to do these things. And again, if you as the citizens don't hold them accountable, there's nothing we can do. If you hold them accountable, things will change. You know, things will change. Your city's doing a great job. They're starting to put controls in place. It was a hit, sure, with the audit, but you know what? They're getting good controls in place. But that's not happening everywhere in this town. It's not. The citizens have to get vocal. We can't make them do it. All we can do is point out recommendations, tell them how to do it better, and have the pressure hopefully with the public to make them do it.
Is your office able to be proactive? Like if you see something in
absolutely.
can you stop it, or do you just
We
clean up after?
We usually do. Actually, we have several cities that call us now and want us at certain procurements because they're worried. We just did one this morning in one city, and they were so grateful we were there.
Citizens can call you, or does it
Citizens can, but actually the government's calling us. Actually, I had city managers call me and going, "We're worried about this one. Can you guys come?" And absolutely, we'll make those a priority, and we'll show up for the. If the government calls us, if the city manager calls us, or our city council, we're showing up because that means they're worried. And just even our presence sometimes helps that process, you know, go through. But we just had it this morning. I had a city manager ask us to be there because they were very worried about a bid, and it wound up tanking, and it tanked before it got too far, and life was good. We do that a lot. You just don't write about it because it's the prevention side, it's the proactive side. Yes.
Have you audited other than Jupiter? Have you audited Jupiter?
We have. They have. I think we had a waste management.
No, I mean, have you audited the city for any?
No, we have only done. We just put the audit team up about 9 months ago, and we've done 2 audits. We've released Palm Train, which I'm going to talk about, and the Wellington. And we're about ready to release another city audit, which this city manager actually, from the Wellington, asked us to come in. Which is great. That's what you want. You want your city managers and others to ask us to come in because then they're open-minded. They want to fix things. They want to, and sometimes all due respect, sometimes they have councils who want to go and they won't listen to the city manager, and vice versa. Sometimes it's reversed. The council's trying to go one way and the city manager's going another. And we help that process because we point out the concerns, we point out the weaknesses, we point out the potential frauds, and then they have leverage to make action happen and put in processes.
Can the voters, can the community ask that you come and do an audit?
You can certainly call us and say we have a concern, but you've got to have some documentation. And we're going to talk about that in the investigative world, but yes, you can let us know if you have specifics, absolutely. We can absolutely get in there. We'll help put it on a plan because our audit team is just starting up and we got lots of audits to do. But here's audit. Again, a few cities have auditors, the county has auditors, but we all follow what's called the yellow book and the red book. But the key for us is what I like is like the one we're doing now on Open Sky. I can't talk much about it, it's confidential, but most people know we're doing the Open Sky audit. This was a great audit because it touches almost every jurisdiction, and they need help. West Palm Beach doesn't know which way to go. They're about ready to soak in a bunch of money into it. Several police departments are already on it. I have one police department that they're carrying double radios. I mean, there are issues of safety, but at the end of the day, do you just tank it and start over and waste millions of dollars, or do you find the fix? This is going to be a great audit because we actually went back all the way to the beginning. It's taken a while, but it will be very valuable for everyone, including we've surveyed officers and everything. But this is going to hopefully put together, because what's happening right now is the right hand doesn't trust the left hand, and they finally said, you know what, let the IG come in because we'll trust that report because they don't trust each other. So we're looking forward to that one coming out. But we'd like to look at audits from an enterprise perspective, and that is one that we're going to be doing and releasing hopefully in the next few months. The Palm Tran audit, this was our first audit. This actually was a spinoff. We actually got, the county reported to us that we had an employee that was stealing toner cartridges, stole 2 of them. And they brought it to our attention because theft they have to tell us. And when we got in there, we started to realize that it is more than 2 toner cartridges. In fact, we found her, by the way, if you have a business and you see toner cartridges missing, go to eBay, because that's where they sell it. And that's what she was doing. She was selling all of the county's property and supplies on eBay to a tune of over almost $19,000. But when we got in there, we referred that to actually the Sheriff's office that wanted to work in that with us, the theft side of the house. And why I always say it's important to understand, the criminal case can keep going. But what our role in the head of this is, because people go, why did you audit this? I had one commissioner ask me, why did you audit this? Because it's one thing to take care of the employee. The IG hat says, well, how did it happen? And how do I stop that from happening again so the government doesn't get taken advantage of? That's the IG role. And so we opened up an audit, and then what we found was not only was she in charge of the supplies, but this individual was in charge of payroll. Well, you can just imagine. We started looking, and all the time cards were missing supervisory signatures. There was overtime galore. And in fact, one person was making more on overtime than their salary. But the bad news, there was no approval process in place, so we didn't know whether they worked or not. So we couldn't go criminally on it. But the good news is, Palm Tran, which never puts in audit findings, they usually brush them off from their internal auditor, he immediately started making the changes in our audit, so that by the time we were done, they already had a new system in place, and that will never happen again. So, and she was arrested, her case is pending, she's pending prosecution now. She may have fled. Probably may have fled. This one, the Wellington audit, some of you probably are aware of this. The key to this one, really, again, it's the public purpose. When you have purchasing cards, there are codes that you must use. And what was happening is there was a lot of meals being bought and other items that were not part of the state code system. And the reason they're not part of the state code system is they are illegal purchases under state law. And they are illegal purchases under federal law. But guess what? They are not illegal purchases by the municipal law. So even though this is my old theory, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And if there's not a clear public purpose, should you be spending taxpayer dollars on these items? So Wellington, the city's doing a good job in looking at all this and putting some processes in place to make sure that they can pass a smell test to you, the public, of whether they should be using purchasing cards on these kind of items. We found a whole bunch of other things. This was a very long audit. We made lots of recommendations to do their testing and their reviews. We had some issues with fuel cards, but again, their key to this audit was really the public purpose piece. Okay, investigations. Now, in our world, you do not need to send us a sworn complaint. Anyone can send us a complaint. Typically, we like the person to put it in writing because we need to call you back, because if you don't give us enough information, we're going to file it as information because we can't look for a needle in a haystack. You know, I have a handful of investigators with a whole lot of work, and to kind of give you a perspective, we have over 500 complaints in our office. We have very strict time standards. We are accredited like a law enforcement agency. We literally have 2 days to get it in the system, 5 days to make a decision and get it either assigned or to the government. Typically what we do is we look at the complaint. One, do we have jurisdiction? If we don't have jurisdiction, we get it to the person who does, and we let the person who filed the complaint know where it went. So we always close that door. Then we look at, okay, is there a governing directive? Is there a law? Is there a policy that they potentially broke? If there is, great, we're in. If there's not, then the question becomes, should there be a policy on the books? That changes it from an investigation to a management review, which is what we're doing an awful lot of. We are doing more management reviews and investigations because what we're seeing is that the policy is not on the books, or that it's so weak that you can't hold the employee accountable for a weak policy. So the key is, again, to look at the controls. We do give whistleblower status for individuals who are employees if they report something of gross nature. And again, we actually have to test our own independence. Every one of my staff on the investigative side must attest in the system. If they don't attest their independence per investigation, they cannot get in. Just like myself, if I don't attest to the independence, because I read everything and release everything, at the end of the day, it's my responsibility. I also attest to every one of my cases for independence. Quick examples of some of the reviews we've done in investigations. Going back to the SBE program, one of the things we found was the county has a policy on the books that if you are the low bid, but you do not utilize a small business, but you are the second bidder and you're within this percentage point or dollar point, you get the bid. Well, in the case that I was telling you about where it was fictitious, you know, the false, you know, he wasn't a distributor and all that, the company, these two companies, were using non-SBEs that won the work. One company attested, and they're all, I mean, they're literally outright. One company had a list of 35 non-SBEs on the wall. The other guy had 50. The prime, everybody knew it. The county knew it. Everybody knew in road construction, in Holland, you can't use a small business. They don't have the equipment. So I'm going, well, if you knew, why are you having this credit for this type of industry? And so as a result, they gave it to the second bidder to a tune of $231,000, and they weren't even SBEs. Gone. So we made major recommendations on this program. The only negative thing that we are going to be watching is that the county, the person in charge of this program, did not recommend elimination of the SBE program for this industry. We don't agree with it. We are going to watch it because if it comes up again, we're going to hit them again with the hopes that they'll bring it to the board next time. Although the board knows because they see my reports, but they really need to look at this because there's no way they can have SBEs. There's just no way, and everybody knows it. And that's the frustration part. But this was early on when we started. Maybe they'll get, you know, they're actually doing really well now. It was a little bit rough at the beginning. But most of the recommendations we make, actually almost like 89%, 90% of the recommendations we make, they actually have implemented. City of Riviera, this one just recently released, this one was online. This was a situation where the right hand didn't know what the left hand was doing, and poor Kindred Hospital actually, they didn't understand it. They got a bill, they thought everything was included, but basically there's like 4 departments that didn't communicate, and they never hooked up their water meter for 4 years. So as a result, we calculated about 60 grand. They negotiated about 32,000 is what they could come up with, and they got 32 grand back, the city did, just because we had to estimate it. And then the other thing was, this was rather interesting, they actually hired their former engineer as a consultant without a bid process, paid him $576,000. And then the testimony was it really wasn't an engineer. Well, yeah, he was. And even they indicated in their response initially that, no, he wasn't an engineer, but he's gone. So they know he was an engineer. Okay, state attorney cases, just a couple of them. I mean, we do several. We've had a few, probably about 9 arrests so far, cases we brought over there. This one was an employee who actually lied on our applications for housing. She's pending, in fact, they're doing a plea right now. So hopefully this month we should have her plea deal out with a tune of $212,000. We're taking the house back, and she's gone. Although she's working for another city right now, so hopefully that will.
So they're going to be able to recover their son?
They're taking the house back, yes.
So they'll sell it and recover
Yes,
the son?
yeah. This one's a good one, yes.
How does she get to go work for someone else?
If you do this, you understand. I'm sure it will be in the paper soon.
Yeah, it actually will be.
Yeah, it probably will.
I'm a reporter.
Oh, there you go. Look up this case for mom.
I'll tell you.
It's way out. This one was despicable, and there's only $16,000, but it was one of the most despicable cases I've seen so far. This is a situation where you have the lowest income. These were non-speaking U.S. citizens who were living the dream to buy their first home. And what was happening here, you had a for-profit and a not-for-profit that hooked together and made. I know she's not going to go. I'm sorry, but they hooked together, and as a result, they basically were telling you, we can't process the county paperwork unless you pay us X amount of dollars. And they knew how much you had in your account because they had all your financials. And so everyone was paying between $3,000 and $5,000. It was the most despicable case. 3 of them have already pled. They're going to turn in the other 2, and hope to not see the light of day. But we did charge them grand theft, speeding, defraud, and money laundering.
Want them out of the country too?
They're legals here. They're like you and I. But we actually worked with DFS, Division of Financial, or OFR rather, Office of Financial Regulation. We've already pulled all their licenses.
They were preying on immigrants.
Yep, absolutely.
Who were legal immigrants.
Yes, it is despicable. But their licenses are gone, and hopefully a couple will be in jail. What we don't do, we don't fire, we don't discipline, we don't do the actual criminal. We'll do the control part of it. We don't make arrests, and we don't make policy. We make recommendations on what to do, best practices and stuff sometimes, but we don't make policy. Why? Because we can't audit it. What we do, we issue recommendations, we issue findings, and it's all transparent to the public. Everything we do is on our website. Real quick snapshot. This is just the counties and municipalities. It's not our other contracts. But bottom line is we're responsible for overseeing $1.6 billion in contract activity, almost over $10 billion with our contractors, and we have a budget of 2.8 plus the contracts. It's a little over $3.5 million. To give you a little perspective, over 15,000 employees just for the counties and municipalities. It doesn't include the contractors and all the people we oversee, and then we have 8 associated with our other contracts. And right now we have 18 on board of the 32 for the cities and the county. Yes.
What percentage of that 2.7 million in your budget is coming from the quarter of a percent of the contracts?
Well, we actually reduced it to 0.18. So all that comes from the 0.18, but of course, as you know, we're not getting funded by the cities right now. Some of the cities aren't funding us right now. So
what percentage is coming from the contracts?
Well, all that comes from right now it's from a LOGR system, which is the contract activity through the government. That's how they're doing it.
It's billed, but it's based on the contract.
Right.
But it's billed to the cities based on the contract amount.
Right.
Am I right?
Yes. Which is that LOGR system that's audited by the state. That's what our website looks like. Please visit it. There's all kinds of things on here. One thing I want to show you when I started saying we're going crazy and we need help in municipalities, if you look at that, you can see there's a little red thing on this thing somewhere. But if you see that little squirt up, that's the municipalities. That's what happened since early last fiscal year, October, all the way to the present. We are spiking up high on the municipalities. You can actually click on that chart. It's on the main page of our website. It'll break down for you what cities, and correspondence don't necessarily mean a bad thing. Correspondence could be public records requests, but the majority of it is 80% of it is complaints. But it shows you where they're coming in from. Good, bad, or different. And then just real quickly, if you are interested in volunteering for our office, we are looking for individuals. The good thing about this is that people that go to the city council or the commission meetings, sometimes they don't quite understand what happens. So we're going to train you on what's an agenda, what's a consent agenda, what does it mean as a change order, if you hear a contract. So if anybody's interested that goes to council meetings, just call my office. And that's it.
Very good.
Thank you so much. Questions? I know it's getting late in the day. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think people got to ask questions during the presentation.
If you have any questions, call me. Dennis.
Just a quick one. Is that the Wellington dropped out of the lawsuit,
yes, it did.
Which is good for the village to do, I believe. But we're still, faced with this thing. I know it's an ongoing thing, so you really can't comment on it. But can you just tell us 30,000-foot view where you see that going?
The mediation didn't happen. It just went bust. So the cities and the county could not negotiate. So as a result, what's happening now is we've made a motion to enjoin the lawsuit because there's really nobody at the table for the people's voice. And to make sure that what you voted on, you're going to get. And so if we are allowed to enjoin, then what will happen is then we've done 4 exhibits. 2 are against the clerk of the court and 2 are against the 14 municipalities. Basically telling the clerk that she needs to do her ministerial duties because her job is to bill, to collect and to deposit, of which she decided, even though she filed to enjoin and she asked the judge what to do, she did it anyway. She's not billing, she's not collecting, and she's not depositing. So we've asked the judge if we can intervene to do those functions so that we can at least get the money from those cities that want to pay. And then the other part of the lawsuit is that the cities that are suing is that while this is ongoing, you need to pay the law requires you to do that. So that's where we're at.
And for the record, on behalf of Wellington,
Yes.
we always pay.
Yes.
We were a party
Yes.
to the lawsuit earlier, which has now changed. Whether or not that's good or bad is a whole other issue, but we always pay. So, because we agree, even though we wanted to make sure, the process was correct, we always agreed to pay that. So, we got mixed up in
Any more questions, please, could we ask, because we've got a business meeting, we've got a